Okay, so in this video we're going to go through what crude oil is and looking at what makes up crude oil. So the first thing I've got here is some diagrams, and I'd just like to go through what those mean and how that shows crude oil being made. So this is how crude oil is being produced. So you have to imagine originally in the sea we've got some plants at the bottom, we've got some fish and different animals. Draw goldfish for ease. You've got other things like plankton, different animals. I'm going to leave it as that so you can imagine animals in the sea with the sand at the bottom. And that is, 300 to 400 million years before the crude oil can be used. And then what happens is, unfortunately, some of these animals are going to die. Their time's up and they go down to the bottom. So here we have plant and animal remains. So that's the dead parts of animal that are just remaining down there. So these plants and animals that were there at that point have actually gone down underneath the sand and silt, and unfortunately they're just remaining down there. You've now got new plants and animals above on the sea level because, it's a ever-going, moving life. So we've got our fish still, and we've got our little plants and animals now in the sea. And what's happening is this sand and silt is giving it pressure. So that pressure is going to cause the plant and animal remains to compress to each other. That compression over lots of million years, because remember it's still between 50 and 100 million years before we can use it. What happens is that pressure over many years causes this crude oil to be produced. So what happens is we've now got here our oil and gas deposits. So we can now mine down and collect this oil and gas, and this is a lot of it is called crude oil. So what is crude oil? Now if we just zoom into a bit of crude oil here, and I say, well, what's in it? If we were to scientifically look what's in it, we might have something called CH4, we might have C2H8, you might have C2H10, C3, H6, you might have C5, H12, and the pattern there is that all of those molecules are molecules with carbon and hydrogen in them, and what we call them is hydrocarbons. So it's a mixture of things, mixture of molecules, crude oil, so it is a mixture of molecules, but they are mainly called hydrocarbons. And those hydrocarbons is anything with a hydrogen or a carbon in them, okay? And that's it. So it's hydrogen or carbon only. So it has to have hydrogen, it has to have carbon, and there can't be anything else in it. As soon as you've got a chlorine in that molecule, so say we had CH3Cl, that's no longer a hydrocarbon because it's got a chlorine atom in it. So hydrocarbons, and you can see it in the name, if we split that up, hydrogen and carbon, so hydrocarbons have to have hydrogen and carbon in the molecule and nothing else, because as soon as we've got something else, it stops being a hydrocarbon. So what is crude oil? It's the remains of dead animals and plants or biomass that have been compressed over many years. They've produced the oil and gas. Inside that crude oil, if we were to use a magnifying glass and really look at what's actually inside, it's a mixture of molecules, with most of those molecules being hydrocarbons, so things with just carbon and just hydrogen in them. So what I'd like us to do is have a go at looking at which of these are hydrocarbons. So just draw the ones that are hydrocarbons out, and then we'll go through it. So pause the video here. Okay, so you should have had chance to go through this now and decide which ones are hydrocarbons and which ones aren't. So you should have a good idea. The first one, as you can see there, it's got carbon and hydrogen. There's nothing else, so that must just be a hydrocarbon. So you get yourself a green pen, that's correct. This one, we've got carbon, hydrogen. Yeah, it's looking like it's a hydrocarbon. Oh, no, it's not a hydrocarbon because it's got a Cl in it, so you wouldn't draw that one out. Here, looking a little bit different because we've got something called a double bond that we're going to look at in the next few videos. But actually, there's only hydrogens and carbons in it, so it's a hydrocarbon. This one again is a little bit different, but it's just got hydrogens and carbons in it. This one has got Cl and Br in it, so it is not a hydrocarbon. Final one's quite a long chains one, what I mean by long chained is there's lots of carbons in a chain together, so it's a long chained hydrocarbon because there's nothing but hydrogens and carbons in there. So just mark your answers, make sure you got that right, and you're not confused what a hydrocarbon is, because it is just anything that has both hydrogen and carbon and nothing else in that molecule. Okay, so the main type, there's a few types of hydrocarbons that we need to look at, and the first one in this video is going to be alkanes, and in the next few videos I'll look at other ones. So alkanes look similar to the ones I've drawn on there. You start with something like this where there's just one carbon, and what we need to know is every carbon can have 4 bonds off of it. So here there is CH4 because there's 4 bonds coming off it. Next biggest one would be 2 carbons and then hydrogens coming off of it, and that's the next alkane in the order. Then you've got 3 carbons in a chain with hydrogens, and then you'd finally have 4. Now there's plenty more of these. You only need to know about the first 4 and the names of the first 4, but they can go up to lots and lots of carbons in a chain. These are all different types of alkanes, and they all have names and their properties are different. Now we're not going to look at the properties in this video, but in future videos you can look at the properties of them. So we start with carbon and 4 hydrogens, so we've got CH4. You've then got 2 carbons, so C2, and there's 6 hydrogens. This one you've got 3 carbons and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hydrogens. This one we've got 4 carbons and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hydrogens. So that's us having drawn them out, and then me also writing the formula for them. Now we need to be able to name them. Now this is what this is over here. This is the names of the first 4, and that's the only names you need to know, the first 4. So we start with methane, and then we've got ethane, propane and butane. Now the way I remember this, and you might want to come up with your own rhyme or use mine, is monkeys eat peeled bananas. So it starts with monkeys, which links to methane because they both begin with an M, and then we've got ethane is eat, peeled is propane, and finally bananas links to butane, and that just allows me to remember the order in which the alkanes come. So we know that CH4 now is methane, and C2H6 is ethane, and C3H8 is propane, and C4H10 is butane. Now what you need to know is the general formula of alkanes. Now this is something you can either memorise or you can use to or you can remember by working it out. So you either remember it or you can work it out looking at them. Now it just depends on how it works for you. So first of all, I'm going to use ethane to show you how you can work it out. So C2H6. Now the general formula is when you put N's in place, so then you can multiply it by the number of carbons. So I'm going to just change that to Cn. Okay? H. Now, what's the relationship between these two? Well, if I was to double 2, I'd get to 4. So you could do H2N plus 2 to get it to 6. So therefore, if I have this as my general formula, and I've worked that out by the relationship between the 2 and the 6 being, the 6 is double 2 plus 2. That's where I've got this from. You can then use this on each of them. So if I said a carbon with a hydrocarbon with 4 carbons, how many hydrogens would there be? Well, you'd do 2 times 4 plus 2. So therefore you would have C4H, 2 times 4 is 8, plus 2 is 10. And that links to that one, that butane. So just a summary of what you need to know from this video. You need to have an understanding that dead plants and animals build up over time. Lots of pressure causes crude oil to be produced. You need to know that crude oil is a mixture of molecules that are mainly hydrocarbons, which are things with just hydrogens and carbon bonded together. You then need to know specifically about alkanes, and you need to know the first 4. So you need to know methane, ethane, propane and butane, and you need to have an understanding of what that general formula there shows us. But that is the basics of what crude oil is and looking at the first group of hydrocarbons that we need to know.